A lonely rancher never experienced love until an Apache crossed his path. John Miller had always lived alone. From the time he could remember, his life had been tied to the land. The Miller family ranch had been in his family for generations, passed down from his grandfather to his father, and now it belonged entirely to him. It was a vast stretch of dry plains and rolling hills in Arizona, dotted with cacti, sagebrush, and rugged rock formations that caught the sun in brilliant colors at dawn and sunset. The land was harsh, unforgiving at times, but John had learned to respect it. He rose every day before the sun, tending to the cattle, repairing fences, and making sure every corner of the ranch was in order. There was pride in hard work, he thought, but there was also a deep, quiet loneliness that came with the territory. John's neighbors often said he was a good man, hardworking, honest, and dependable, but many also whispered about his solitude. He had never married, never had a family of his own, and while some people assumed it was because he had been unlucky, the truth was that John had never known love. It wasn't that he didn't want it, it simply hadn't come into his life. He had grown used to the rhythm of working the land, the sound of wind over the plains, and the quiet evenings under the stars. It was a peaceful life, but a lonely one. Mornings were always the busiest. John would start by checking on the cattle, making sure none had wandered off or fallen ill. He knew each animal by sight and could tell if something was wrong just by the way they moved or ate. Then he would repair fences, which often needed constant attention because of the storms that swept across the plains. He fixed water troughs, cleaned barns, and sometimes spent hours mending machinery that refused to cooperate. By midday, he would take a short break, sitting under the shade of a lone mesquite tree, wiping sweat from his brow and staring at the endless horizon. On those quiet afternoons, he sometimes allowed himself to imagine a life different from the one he had always known, a life that included laughter, companionship, and warmth. But those thoughts would quickly fade, replaced by the work waiting for him. Evenings were the hardest. After dinner, he would sit on the porch of the small, weathered house that had been in his family for decades. The sun would dip behind the mesas, painting the sky with streaks of orange, pink, and purple, and a cold breeze would sweep across the plains. In those moments, the silence of the land seemed louder. Occasionally, he would hear coyotes in the distance or the faint rumble of a storm far away, but for the most part, it was just him and the land. He would think about the neighbors' families, about the children running through yards with laughter spilling into the air, and he would feel a pang of longing. John had friends, yes, but not many. Most of them were fellow ranchers or tradesmen who shared tips about cattle, crops, or the weather. They were good men, trustworthy, and sometimes their company was comforting. Yet their lives were busy with wives, children, and responsibilities that John did not have. Invitations to dinners or celebrations were polite, but he often declined, finding it easier to stay on the ranch than to step into a world that reminded him of what he did not have. There was no bitterness in him, only acceptance of the life he had chosen, or perhaps the life that had chosen him. Despite the loneliness, John found solace in the small things. The smell of fresh hay, the sight of a newborn calf wobbling on unsteady legs, the way the first light of morning hit the ridge, it all gave him a sense of purpose. He liked knowing that his hands shaped the world around him, that his decisions affected life on the ranch, that he could face a challenge and see it through. There was dignity in work, and for John, that dignity was enough to fill the long hours. Still, there were moments when he could not ignore the emptiness. Sometimes, late at night, he would light a lamp in the small living room and sit by the window, staring at the stars. He would think about what life might have been if he had someone to share these simple moments with, someone to laugh with at the end of a hard day, someone to worry about when a storm approached, someone to sit beside him on the porch in silence, sharing the peace of the evening. The thought of love was both comforting and painful, like a door he longed to open but had never found the key for. John had tried once or twice to imagine what it would be like to meet someone special. He had considered attending dances or gatherings in the nearest town, hoping that fate might intervene. But every time he approached the idea, a familiar hesitation held him back. Maybe it was fear of rejection, or maybe it was fear of change. His life had been predictable and safe, and love, with all its unknowns, seemed like a gamble he wasn't ready to take. So he stayed on the ranch, keeping to his routines, tending to his cattle, and speaking to no one more than necessary. The ranch itself was both a blessing and a burden. It provided everything he needed: food, shelter, work, and a connection to the land, but it also kept him isolated. Visitors were rare, and the nearest town was miles away. When the wind blew harsh across the plains and dust swirled in the late afternoon sun, John felt both awe and loneliness. He would climb to the highest point on his land, the northern ridge, and look out at the horizon. The vastness of the plains was breathtaking, but it was also a reminder of how alone he truly was. He imagined the land stretching endlessly without anyone to share it with. That thought often brought a heavy ache in his chest. Still, John never complained. He knew that the life of a rancher was not for everyone. It demanded hard work, patience, and a certain resilience that few could understand. The land had its own rhythm, and he had learned to follow it. The seasons dictated his days: planting in the spring, harvesting in the fall, preparing for the cold winters and the dry summers. He respected that rhythm, even if it reminded him of what he lacked. On some nights when the moon was full and the sky clear, John would lie awake, listening to the distant sounds of nature. The howl of a coyote, the rustle of a snake through the grass, the whisper of the wind over the plains, they were his companions, constant and reliable. And yet, even in their presence, he could not shake the sense that something essential was missing from his life. A presence that was human, warm, and alive. In his solitude, John had grown strong. His hands were calloused from work, his skin weathered from years under the sun, and his mind sharp from problem-solving and careful observation. Yet he had not grown hard. There was kindness in his actions, a gentle patience with the animals and with the land, and a respect for life that went beyond the boundaries of his ranch. It was this quiet strength that made him respected in the community, even if most people did not know the depth of his loneliness. John sometimes wondered if his life would always be this way: quiet, predictable, and solitary. He did not yearn for excitement or wealth. He simply wished for companionship. The kind of companionship that did not need words to feel complete, that could sit in silence together and feel understood. But he had resigned himself to waiting, believing that perhaps some things were not meant for him. Love, he thought, might always be a story for others, not for a man like him, tied to his land and his routines. And yet, even in his resignation, there was hope. A small, flickering hope that life had more to offer than just the ranch and the work it demanded. He did not know when or how, but he felt deep inside that change was possible. That one day someone might cross the plains, someone who would see him not just as a rancher, but as a man capable of love, laughter, and companionship. Until that day, he would continue his work, tending to his cattle, repairing fences, and watching the sun rise and set over the endless horizon, carrying with him a quiet longing that only the vast, open land could understand. John Miller's life was simple, honest, and filled with hard work, but it was also lonely. The ranch, for all its beauty and abundance, could not fill the void in his heart. Yet within him, a spark of hope remained, waiting for the moment that would change everything, waiting for the day when the solitude of the plains would be replaced with the warmth of human connection. Until that day arrived, John would continue to live in harmony with the land, tending to its needs, listening to its whispers, and silently dreaming of a life where he was not alone. One spring morning, John Miller was walking along the northern ridge of his ranch, checking the fences and the grazing cattle, when something unusual caught his eye. A figure appeared in the distance, moving slowly across the plains, struggling to control a horse that seemed frightened and exhausted. John squinted against the sunlight, his curiosity piqued. It was rare for anyone to wander so close to his land, and he felt a mix of caution and concern. As he approached, he noticed the figure more clearly, a young woman, dressed in clothing that suggested she was not from the nearby town. Her dark hair caught the sunlight, shimmering in waves, and her eyes held a depth of awareness that made John pause. She was trying to calm the horse, her hands gentle but firm on its reins, her voice soft and soothing. John admired the way she moved, confident and careful, yet cautious, as if she understood the unpredictable nature of the animal. John cleared his throat, and the woman looked up, startled at first. Then she smiled, a small, polite smile that was both cautious and grateful. "I didn't mean to wander onto your land," she said, her voice calm and melodic with an accent he could not quite place. "My horse got spooked and I lost control." John nodded, stepping closer. "You're welcome here." "Let me help." He approached the horse slowly, holding out his hands to avoid frightening it further. Together, they managed to calm the animal. John could feel the tension in the woman's shoulders as she finally relaxed, and he realized he was witnessing something remarkable. Not just her skill with the horse, but her patience, her quiet strength, and her connection to the animal. Once the horse was steady, John offered her water from a canteen he carried, and she accepted gratefully. "Thank you," she said, her eyes meeting his. There was a sincerity there that made him feel both welcomed and intrigued. "I'm Ayana," she added. "I'm traveling to my tribe's settlement, and I had some trouble with my horse." John nodded, introducing himself in return. He learned that she was Apache, journeying across the plains to reach her family's village. She explained that she had been riding alone, carrying supplies and messages between settlements, a responsibility her people trusted her with because of her skills and courage. John listened, fascinated not just by her story but by the way she spoke, so confidently, so gently, and with a sense of purpose that reminded him of his own dedication to the land. Without thinking, John offered her a place to rest. "You can stay on the ranch until your horse recovers," he said. "It's not much, but it's safe, and I have food and water." Ayana hesitated for a moment, perhaps weighing the risks of trusting a stranger, but then she nodded. "I would be grateful," she said quietly. Over the next few days, John and Ayana worked together to care for the horse. She showed him techniques he had never learned, subtle ways to calm a frightened animal, and how to notice signs of fatigue or illness before they became serious problems. John watched her carefully, noting the steadiness in her movements, the patience in her hands, and the gentleness in her voice. For the first time in many years, he felt a spark of curiosity, and something more that he could not yet name, stirring in his chest. They worked side by side from sunrise to sunset. John taught her how to mend fences, how to track the herd's movements, and how to repair broken equipment. In return, Ayana shared knowledge about the land he had lived on all his life, how to read the sky for weather, how to track animals by their footprints, and how to listen to the whispers of the wind for signs of danger. Their conversations started as practical instruction, but soon they began to share stories about their lives, their families, and the experiences that had shaped them. John found himself drawn to her wisdom, her calm presence, and the gentle humor she occasionally revealed. As the days passed, a rhythm developed between them. Mornings were for work, afternoons for tending to the horse and the cattle, and evenings were spent sitting near the barn, sometimes talking, sometimes silent, simply enjoying each other's presence. John realized that for the first time in years he felt understood. Ayana did not judge him for his solitary life. She seemed to accept him as he was, seeing value in his hard work and his quiet ways. It was a new feeling for John, one that was both exciting and frightening. At night, John would sometimes catch himself watching her as she worked or moved around the ranch. There was something captivating about the way she carried herself, so confident yet unassuming. Her laughter, light and genuine, echoed across the plains, and for the first time he noticed how empty his evenings had been without it. There was a warmth in her presence that he had never known, a gentle reminder that companionship was possible, even after so many years of solitude. Despite the growing bond, John remained cautious. He had spent so long living alone that the idea of opening his heart felt risky. He feared rejection, or worse, the possibility that this connection might fade as quickly as it had arrived. Yet, every time he looked at Ayana, he felt an undeniable pull, a sense that their meeting was not mere chance. The land around them, vast and open, seemed to reflect the new possibilities in his life. The possibility that love, patience, and understanding could exist in ways he had never imagined. Yana, too, began to show signs of trust. She would share stories of her childhood, of the traditions of her people, and of the journeys she had undertaken to help her community. She spoke of the importance of respect for the land, for animals, and for the people around her. John listened intently, fascinated by the depth of her knowledge and the strength of her character. In her, he saw not just a visitor, but a teacher, a companion, and perhaps, though he did not yet dare to admit it, something more. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled across the plains. Dark clouds gathered quickly, and the wind picked up, whipping dust and debris through the air. John and Ayana were in the middle of tending to the northern fence when the first drops of rain began to fall. They worked quickly, securing the livestock and reinforcing weak sections of the fence. The storm raged around them, Yet there was a sense of shared purpose that made the chaos feel manageable. They moved together, their actions coordinated without words, as if they had known each other for years. After the storm passed, they stood together under the shelter of the barn, dripping wet but safe. Yana laughed softly, brushing water from her hair, and John felt an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. In that moment, he realized how much he had missed having someone by his side, someone who could face challenges with him, someone whose presence alone made the hardships of life seem lighter. By the time Ayana's horse had fully recovered, a subtle change had taken place on the ranch. John no longer felt the same emptiness he had felt for so many years. The land, while still vast and demanding, now felt alive with possibilities. The days were no longer just about work. They were about connection, understanding, and the quiet moments of shared effort that brought two people together. He found himself looking forward to each morning, not just for the work, but for the chance to see Ayana, to learn from her, and to share in the simple joys of life on the ranch. One evening, as the sun set behind the mesas and painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, John and Ayana sat on the porch, sipping water and watching the cattle settle down for the night. They did not speak much. Words were not always necessary. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. John felt a sense of peace he had never known, a feeling that perhaps life had more to offer than solitude and hard work. Perhaps, he thought, companionship and even love could find their way to a lonely rancher. As the stars appeared one by one in the clear night sky, John realized that the world was changing for him. The arrival of Ayana, her courage, her wisdom, and her quiet strength, had opened a door he had long believed was closed. He did not know what the future held, but for the first time he felt hope, not just for the days ahead, but for the possibility of a life shared with someone who understood and accepted him. In the weeks that followed, John and Ayana continued to work together, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. She taught him new ways to care for the land and the animals, and he shared his own knowledge, guiding her through the tasks that were uniquely challenging in the vast Arizona plains. There was a rhythm to their partnership, a natural flow that made the work easier, more meaningful, and even enjoyable. John began to notice small changes in himself. He laughed more freely, spoke more openly, and found himself dreaming, not just of the land, but of a future that included Ayana. He had never imagined that someone could arrive in his life and alter it so profoundly, yet here she was, teaching him not just about horses and fences, but about trust, companionship, and the quiet power of human connection. By the time the first hints of summer appeared on the plains, John realized something he had not felt in years. He was no longer alone. The land was the same, the cattle were still his responsibility, and the ranch demanded his work and attention. But now there was a presence beside him, steady and strong, someone whose smile brightened his days and whose wisdom guided his nights. Yana had crossed his path, and in doing so, she had crossed the invisible barrier he had built around his heart, bringing with her the first real taste of love and companionship he had ever known. Days turned into weeks, and John Miller found himself looking forward to each. Morning more than ever before. The sun rising over the mesas, once a signal to begin the long day of work, now brought a sense of excitement. Yana was no longer a visitor on his ranch. She had become a constant presence, moving through the fields and barns with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged there. John could feel the change in himself, a shift in the rhythm of his days, as though her presence had brought life to a part of him he had long forgotten. They had developed a routine, though it was far from dull. Mornings were spent checking the cattle and repairing fences, afternoons were devoted to tending the fields, and evenings were their time to share stories or sit quietly on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the horizon. Their work together was seamless. John had always prided himself on his knowledge of the ranch, but Ayana brought a new perspective, teaching him to see the land with fresh eyes. She noticed small signs in the soil and the plants, subtle hints in the wind, and changes in the animals' behavior that even John had missed. He began to realize how much there was to learn, how much he had taken for granted in his years of solitude. Ayana was patient, never condescending, and always encouraging. When John struggled to master a new technique she suggested, she would smile and guide him gently, never raising her voice, never showing frustration. Her calm demeanor had a way of easing his own anxieties, and he found himself trusting her instincts even when they contradicted his own. It was a strange sensation for a man who had spent decades relying solely on himself, but John found it comforting. There was a lesson in humility, he realized, in allowing someone else to teach you, even when you had spent your life believing you knew everything about the land you called home. Their conversations grew deeper over time. At first, they spoke only of practical matters, the fences, the cattle, the unpredictable weather. But gradually, personal stories emerged. John shared tales of his childhood on the ranch, of summers spent chasing calves and learning to ride, of his father teaching him how to read the land and respect its rhythms. Yana spoke of her own upbringing, of the traditions of her people, and of the responsibilities she had carried from a young age. They discovered common ground in their connection to the land, their respect for animals, and the quiet determination to face life's challenges head-on. John had never felt this kind of understanding with anyone before. Yana did not judge him for his solitude or his stubborn habits. Instead, she seemed to see the man he truly was beneath the surface. He began to notice little things about her that captivated him. The way her eyes sparkled when she spoke about something she loved. The soft sound of her laughter when a calf stumbled or a fence post refused to stay upright. The quiet strength in her hands when guiding a horse or lifting a heavy tool. These small details slowly chipped away at the walls he had built around his heart over decades. Despite the growing closeness, John struggled with his feelings. He had spent so many years alone that the idea of love felt almost foreign. He worried that expressing his emotions might scare Yana away, or worse, that she might not feel the same. Yet every day, every shared task, every story and glance made it harder to ignore the pull in his heart. He was learning that love did not always arrive with grand gestures. Sometimes it grew quietly, steadily, like a seed nourished by sunlight and rain, taking root until it became impossible to ignore. Tiana, too, had begun to notice the change in John. She observed his quiet gestures, the way he would pause to look out over the plains, as if thinking about something he could not say aloud. She saw the way he helped her with the horse, not because it was required, but because he cared. There was a tenderness in his actions, subtle yet unmistakable, and it did not escape her notice. She began to feel a warmth toward him that went beyond gratitude or friendship. John was no longer just a rancher. He was a man who had weathered the hardships of life and still held space in his heart for kindness, patience, and connection. One afternoon, as the sun blazed high above the plains, Yana asked John to show her how he repaired a broken water trough. The task was simple, but as they worked side by side, their hands occasionally brushed, sending small shocks of awareness through John. He found himself lingering near her, wanting to be close without knowing why. Yana noticed too, and though she did not speak of it, she too felt the quiet tension, the unspoken understanding growing between them. It was a delicate dance, one of shared work and silent emotions, building a bond stronger than either had expected. There were moments of laughter as well. One morning, a calf managed to escape the pen and ran across the field in a frantic attempt to evade capture. John and Ayanna chased it together, slipping in the mud and tripping over brush, laughing until their sides ached. In those moments, the years of solitude John had endured seemed to vanish, replaced by the simple joy of shared experience. He realized that life could be playful and light, even amidst hard work and responsibility, and that this joy was amplified when shared with someone who understood him completely. As spring turned to early summer, their bond deepened further. John began to open up about fears he had long hidden, the fear of being alone forever, the fear of losing the land that had been his life, and the fear that love might never find him. Yana listened without judgment, offering comfort through words, a gentle touch on his shoulder, or simply a knowing glance. She shared her own vulnerabilities as well, speaking of the responsibilities she carried as part of her people, the fear of failure, and the challenges of balancing tradition with her own desires. Through these shared confessions, trust grew, rooted in honesty and mutual respect. One evening, after a long day of work in the fields, they sat on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mesas. The sky was ablaze with colors, orange, pink, and deep purple blending together in a breathtaking display. John felt a longing he could not name, a yearning that had been absent from his life for so long. He realized that in Ayana, he had found not just a companion, but someone who made him feel alive in ways he had never experienced. He wanted to reach out, to bridge the distance he had always kept between himself and others, but fear still lingered. Ayana, sensing his hesitation, reached over and lightly touched his hand. The contact was brief, yet it carried a weight of unspoken meaning. John's heart raced, and he felt a warmth spread through him that he had not known for decades. In that simple gesture, there was trust, understanding, and the beginning of something deeper than friendship. It was a turning point, subtle yet profound, signaling that their relationship was moving beyond companionship into the realm of the heart. Challenges began to appear as well. Some of John's neighbors, though few in number, whispered about Ayana, questioning her presence on the ranch and her background. John heard these whispers and felt a protective instinct rise within him. He realized that he would not allow prejudice or ignorance to drive a wedge between him and the woman who had become so important to him. Ayana, aware of the scrutiny, remained composed, but John could see the moments when she bristled, and he admired her resilience and dignity in the face of judgment. Despite these obstacles, their connection continued to strengthen. They found joy in the simple tasks of ranch life, feeding the animals, tending the fields, repairing fences, and riding through the plains together. Each task, no matter how mundane, became an opportunity to learn from one another, to laugh, and to grow closer. John began to notice that his thoughts were no longer just about the work or the land, but about Ayana, about the sound of her laughter, the way she moved, and the quiet strength she carried. One morning, John realized that he could no longer imagine his days without her. The idea of her leaving, even temporarily, filled him with a sense of loss he had never experienced. He recognized that what he felt for Ayana was not fleeting or superficial. It was deep, enduring, and transformative. The presence of love, once a distant dream, had entered his life, altering the way he saw the world, the land, and himself. Their partnership, built on trust, respect, and shared experience, had grown into something extraordinary. John understood that love was not just a feeling. It was an action, a choice made each day through care, attention, and shared effort. Ayana had taught him that, through her example and her unwavering presence, and John found himself embracing the truth of it with an open heart. By the time the first hints of summer warmth spread across the plains, John and Ayana had become inseparable. Their lives, once separate and solitary, had intertwined in ways that neither had anticipated. The ranch, which had once been a place of quiet solitude for John, was now alive with laughter, conversation, and shared labor. He realized that love had found him in the most unexpected way, not through grand gestures or dramatic events, but through patience, understanding, and the steady presence of a remarkable woman who had crossed the plains and entered his life. As the days passed, John and Ayana grew closer, their bond deepening in ways that neither had expected. The ranch, once a place of solitude for John, was now filled with laughter, conversation, and the quiet comfort of companionship. Yet, with their growing closeness came new challenges, some from outside, others from within themselves. Life, John realized, did not give gifts without testing their worth. It started with whispers from the neighbors. While most respected John's independence and hard work, a few questioned Ayana's presence on the ranch. They whispered about her being different, about the ways of her people, and some even hinted that a man like John should not trust someone so unlike himself. At first, John tried to ignore it, telling himself that the opinions of a few people who did not understand mattered little. But deep down, he felt the sting of judgment. He hated that these outside voices could create tension in what had become a peaceful part of his life. Ayana noticed the subtle glances and the quiet whispers as well. She did not speak of them, but John could see the slight tightening of her jaw, the way her eyes flicked toward those who watched. He admired her strength and composure, but he could not ignore the fact that she was aware of the scrutiny. He felt a protective instinct rising in him, stronger than any he had ever felt before. For the first time, he realized that love was not just a feeling, it was also responsibility. It was protecting someone who mattered to you, even when the world seemed unfair. Despite the outside pressures, John and Ayana continued their daily routines. They worked together in the fields, tended the cattle, and repaired fences, their movements synchronized as if they had always been partners. Yet, John noticed a subtle change in himself during these tasks. He was no longer just thinking about the work, but about how Yana might feel, what she might need, and how he could make her life easier. He realized that love was a living thing, growing not only in the heart but in every small action, every shared moment, and every silent gesture. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled across the plains. The clouds gathered quickly, dark and heavy, and the wind began to howl, rattling the barn doors and whipping dust through the fields. John and Iana were in the northern pasture, checking on a young calf that had been born only a few days earlier. The rain started lightly, then turned into sheets of water that soaked the land and blurred the horizon. The calf, frightened by the storm, tried to flee, heading toward the edge of the flooded creek that bordered the ranch. Without hesitation, John and Iana ran after it. The mud was thick, pulling at their boots, and the wind threatened to knock them off balance. Yet they moved as one, guiding the frightened animal with gentle words and firm hands. Yana's experience with animals was evident. She could anticipate its movements, calm its panic, and lead it safely back to higher ground. John followed her lead, trusting her instincts while adding his own strength and knowledge of the land. They reached the calf just in time, lifting it away from the rushing water and carrying it to safety. After the storm passed, they stood together, soaked to the bone, shivering but relieved. Iana laughed softly, brushing mud from her boots, and John felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire he built later in the barn. In that moment, he realized how much he had come to rely on her presence, her guidance, and her courage. He saw clearly that life without her would be unimaginable, that the bond they shared was no longer optional but essential. The storm became a turning point for both of them. It was a vivid reminder that the world could be unpredictable and harsh, but that together they were stronger. John began to open up more, speaking about fears he had never shared. He told Ayana about the long years of solitude, about the loneliness that sometimes felt like a shadow stretching over the ranch, about the nights when he wondered if he would ever feel close to another human being. Ayana listened, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder, her eyes reflecting understanding and compassion. She shared her own struggles as well. Ayana spoke of the responsibilities she carried as part of her people, the expectations of her tribe, and the challenges of balancing her duties with her own desires. She had traveled long distances alone, facing dangers and uncertainties that John could barely imagine. Yet she had done so with courage, patience, and dignity. Through their shared confessions, their trust grew, solid and unshakable, like the fences John had built on his land, strong, enduring, and dependable. Despite the growing intimacy between them, challenges continued to test their connection. One evening, while repairing a broken section of fence, they were confronted by a neighbor who questioned Ayana's presence. The man, skeptical and stubborn, hinted that John was taking unnecessary risks by trusting someone from outside the community. John, normally calm and reserved, felt a surge of protectiveness. He stood tall, explaining firmly that Ayana had earned her place on the ranch through hard work, skill, and integrity. His voice, steady and unwavering, carried the weight of his conviction, and the neighbor left with nothing more than muttered words. That confrontation left John reflecting on what love truly meant. It was not just the warmth of shared moments or the comfort of companionship. It was courage, loyalty, and the willingness to face adversity together. It was standing beside someone, defending them, and ensuring that they were safe and respected no matter what challenges arose. He realized that he was willing to face not only the harshness of nature, but also the judgment of others to protect Ayana and the bond they had forged. As summer approached, the ranch came alive with activity. Crops needed tending, cattle required attention, and the days were long and demanding. Yet John and Ayana found joy in their shared labor. They laughed together when mistakes were made, celebrated small victories like a calf taking its first steps, and supported each other through setbacks, such as machinery breaking down or storms damaging the fences. Every challenge became an opportunity to strengthen their partnership, to learn from one another, and to deepen the trust that had grown between them. One particularly hot afternoon, Ayana suggested they take a break and ride across the plains. John agreed, and they mounted their horses, riding side by side as the wind swept across their faces. The landscape stretched endlessly, golden and vibrant under the summer sun. In the quiet of that moment, John felt a sense of freedom he had not known since he was a boy. He glanced at Ayana, her hair blowing in the wind, her eyes focused on the horizon, and he realized that he had found something more valuable than solitude, more rewarding than any work he had ever done, the companionship of someone who truly understood him. The trust between them also grew through small, intimate moments. They shared meals, prepared together in the modest kitchen, exchanging smiles and laughter over simple dishes. They tended to the animals, learning each other's methods and preferences, and discovered that cooperation was as much a part of love as the grand gestures depicted in stories. John found himself thinking of Ayana constantly, not with longing, but with quiet certainty that she belonged in his life. Despite the peace they had created, John remained aware that life was unpredictable. Nature could be harsh, storms could threaten, and challenges could arise at any moment. Yet he no longer faced those difficulties alone. With Ayana by his side, he felt capable of facing whatever came their way. The bond they shared had become a source of strength, resilience, and hope, allowing him to embrace life fully, without fear of solitude or isolation. Evenings became a time for reflection. John and Ayana would sit on the porch, watching the sun set and the stars appear, talking quietly about their hopes, fears, and dreams. These moments were precious, a space where they could simply exist together without the pressures of work or judgment from others. John realized that love was not always about grand declarations or dramatic events. It was often found in the quiet companionship, in shared tasks, and in the unspoken understanding between two people who trusted each other completely. By the time the first signs of autumn appeared, the soft golden light, the slight chill in the evening air, and the rustling of dry leaves across the plains, John knew that his life had changed forever. Yana had crossed his path and brought with her not only companionship, but a profound sense of belonging. He had discovered that love could be patient, quiet, and enduring, growing stronger through shared experiences, trust, and courage. The challenges they had faced, from storms to whispers of doubt, had only strengthened their bond, proving that what they shared was real, resilient, and worth protecting. John looked at Ayana one evening as she tended to the barn while he prepared the horses for the next day's work, and he felt a deep gratitude. She had brought light to his once lonely ranch, warmth to his heart, and hope to a life that had long been defined by solitude. In her, he had found not just a companion but a partner, a confidant, and a source of inspiration. Together, they had faced the trials of the land and the judgments of others, proving to themselves and to the world that love could cross boundaries, bridge differences, and transform lives in ways neither could have imagined. As summer gave way to autumn, the ranch had transformed from a place of quiet solitude into a home alive with companionship, laughter, and the rhythms of shared life. John Miller felt it deeply. Every corner of the land, every breeze over the plains, seemed warmer, more welcoming, because Ayana was there. Their days were full of work, yes, but each task carried a joy that had been absent in John's life for decades. There was a sense of purpose now that went beyond mere survival, a connection that made the endless labor meaningful and the long nights comforting. John watched Ayana as she moved through the ranch, tending to the animals with care, repairing the fences with skill, and guiding the horses with patience. Her presence was calming yet inspiring. He noticed how the sunlight highlighted her hair, how her eyes reflected both determination and kindness, and how effortlessly she moved, attuned to the land and the creatures upon it. He realized that he had never truly appreciated companionship until he had seen it embodied in her. She was not just a visitor or a helper. She was the missing part of his life he had never realized existed. They had settled into a routine that balanced work and connection. Mornings were for the land, checking on cattle, repairing fences, and tending to crops. Afternoons often included riding together, exploring the far edges of the ranch, or learning new skills from each other. Evenings were reserved for quiet reflection, storytelling, and sometimes laughter over small mistakes or clumsy mishaps. Each day reinforced the bond between them, and John found that his heart had opened in ways he had never imagined possible. He thought about Ayana constantly, not with longing alone, but with gratitude for the gift of her presence and the steady rhythm of shared life. One crisp autumn morning, as the first hints of frost shimmered over the grass, John and Ayana were inspecting the northern pasture. A young colt had been acting skittish, and they needed to ensure it was unharmed. John watched Ayana approach the animal, her voice soft and steady, her hands confident and gentle. She calmed it with a few whispered words and careful movements. John realized that he admired her strength as much as he was drawn to her warmth. She moved through the world with courage, grace, and wisdom, and it reminded him that life was richer when shared with someone who saw the world as she did. They spent the afternoon repairing a section of fence that had been weakened by a recent storm. Working side by side, they shared smiles and small jokes, each gesture a reflection of the growing intimacy between them. The rhythm of their labor, the shared effort, and the subtle touches of reassurance all spoke louder than words. John noticed that even simple moments, passing a tool, guiding a horse, lifting a fence post together, had become opportunities to connect, to show care, and to strengthen the invisible bond between them. By evening, the sun had begun its descent, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange, gold, and violet. John and Ayana sat on the porch, sipping water and listening to the gentle rustle of the wind through the trees. The ranch had never felt so alive. The sound of the cattle settling down, the distant call of a hawk, and the whisper of the wind across the plains all seemed to echo the quiet contentment in John's heart. He realized that he no longer felt the loneliness that had defined his life for so long. Ayana had filled the space that had once been empty, bringing companionship, understanding, and love into every corner of his world. There were moments of reflection as well. John thought about the years he had spent alone, the long nights watching the stars, wondering if he would ever experience the warmth of human connection. Now, he realized that life had a way of surprising him, bringing love when he least expected it. Ayana had crossed his path, not just by chance, but in a way that felt destined, as if the land itself had guided her to him. He felt gratitude for her presence, for her courage, and for the way she had opened his heart to possibilities he had long forgotten. Ayana, too, reflected on her journey. She had traveled alone for long distances, carrying messages, supplies, and responsibilities that demanded both skill and courage. She had been wary of strangers, cautious in her trust, and careful in her choices. Yet she had found in John not only a partner in work, but a partner in life. She felt safe, respected, and understood in a way she had rarely experienced. Their bond had grown through shared effort, laughter, and moments of vulnerability, creating a foundation that was strong, enduring, and unshakable. As the days grew shorter and the evenings cooler, John knew that the love between them was real. It was not a fleeting emotion or a passing fancy. It was a quiet, steady flame, sustained by shared experience, trust, and mutual respect. He recognized that love required courage, patience, and dedication, and he felt prepared to give all of that to Ayana. In her, he had found a companion who could face the challenges of life alongside him, someone whose presence made the difficulties lighter and the joys brighter. One evening, a gentle breeze swept across the plains, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and the distant aroma of wood smoke. John and Ayana walked together to the edge of the northern ridge, overlooking the vast expanse of the ranch. The sky was painted in brilliant shades of pink and gold, and the horizon stretched endlessly before them. John paused, taking a deep breath, and turned to Ayana. She smiled, understanding without words, and he felt a surge of emotion that had been building for weeks. He spoke quietly, yet with certainty. Ayana, I don't know when or how it happened, but you've changed my life. The ranch, the land, even the work. I see it differently now because of you. I can't imagine my days without you. You've brought something into my life that I thought I would never have: love, companionship, and hope. Ayana's eyes glistened with emotion. She reached out, taking his hand in hers. John, I feel the same. I have traveled far, faced many challenges, and learned to rely on my own strength. But here, with you, I've found something I didn't know I was missing. You've shown me patience, kindness, and a home that feels safe and true. I want to face life with you, whatever comes our way. In that moment, the vast plains seemed to hold their breath, the sun casting a golden glow over the land, and the two people who had found each other amidst its beauty. They stood together, hand in hand, feeling the quiet power of a bond that had grown slowly, patiently, and resolutely. There was no need for grand declarations or dramatic gestures. Their shared life, their trust, and their unwavering presence in each other's world were enough. The seasons continued to change, and with each passing day, their life on the ranch grew richer. They faced challenges together, The unpredictable weather, the responsibilities of the animals, and occasional scrutiny from the outside world. But each obstacle strengthened their connection. John found himself laughing more freely, dreaming more openly, and appreciating the simple joys of life in ways he had never before considered. Iana, in turn, felt the security and warmth of a partner who respected her, shared her responsibilities, and valued her presence on the ranch and in his life. Even the quiet moments, such as preparing meals together or watching the sunset from the porch, became precious rituals. John learned that love was often expressed in these small, everyday acts, the passing of a tool, a shared smile, a gentle touch, or a word of encouragement. These moments, repeated daily, built a foundation stronger than any declaration of affection could, a life built on trust, care, and mutual respect. By winter, the ranch had fully embraced the warmth of their companionship. The house, once quiet and empty, was filled with laughter, conversation, and the simple comfort of two people who had chosen to share their lives. The animals thrived under their care, the fields remained tended, and the land seemed to respond to the harmony that had grown between its two human inhabitants. John realized that he had finally discovered the life he had longed for, not just the work and responsibility of the ranch, but the presence of someone who made the days brighter, the nights warmer, and the future hopeful. John and Ayana's love was quiet yet powerful. It was built on shared effort, mutual respect, and the understanding that life was best faced together. They had discovered that love could cross boundaries, bridge differences, and transform lives in ways that were subtle, enduring, and deeply meaningful. Their story was not one of dramatic events or fleeting passion, but of steady companionship, courage, and the quiet magic of two hearts finding each other in a vast, demanding world. On a clear winter night, as stars shimmered over the plains and the ranch lay peaceful under the soft glow of the moon, John and Ayana sat together on the porch. They held hands, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here, the storms they had faced, the trust they had built, and the love that had blossomed quietly, steadily, and inevitably. They knew that challenges would continue, that life on the plains could be harsh and unpredictable, but they also knew that together they could face anything. John realized for the first time in his life that he was truly home, not just on the ranch, but in the heart of someone who loved him, understood him, and had chosen to be by his side. Iana felt the same certainty, knowing that she had found a partnership grounded in respect, trust, and a deep, enduring love. Together, they had transformed a ranch defined by solitude into a home defined by connection, joy, and hope. And so, amidst the rolling plains, the cattle, and the endless skies of Arizona, John Miller and Ayana built a life together. A life where love had crossed boundaries, broken the walls of solitude, and created a future filled with warmth, trust, and shared purpose. They had discovered that love, patient and steady, could grow in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the heart finds its home in someone who sees it, values it, and walks beside it, through every storm and every sunrise. In the end, the ranch was no longer just John's land. It was a symbol of their partnership, their shared strength, and the enduring power of love. The lonely rancher had finally experienced what he had longed for his whole life: a companion, a partner, and a love that would carry him through the days, the seasons, and the years to come.